This is Gemara Yevamos Daf Lamed B. Is all learning Shabiring and incredible Schoshira for Yisrael Chaim and Devaira. Tamar Tziba Bas Pero Rachel Shlomo Levi Zava Ovik Ben Teli Shimon Ben Chaya Blum Yehudas Basima Malka. They should all find there should a Chaga in Bekarev. But well, this Chos for Shlomo Shmuel Yisben your favorite Shmuel Ben Tila. Nav Telatim Mechlas and Chom Bas Shivas Arbluma Bas Mendel Chaim Moshe Yeshua Ben Malka Moshe Ben Blima. Chaim Moshe Yeshua Ben Malka Sarah Bas Kila B'Seich Shar Chayli Yisrael. We're holding on the bottom of Lamed Aleph Amid Beis, a new Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Gimel Achim Nisuin Gimel Nachriyos. Three brothers, and this time the three brothers are not married, as we've seen many times, to two sisters, but rather they're married to three separate, unrelated women. Umeis Echad Mehem, and one of the brothers dies. And what happens? The second brother doesn't fully marry that woman. That woman falls liyibum, and he does maimer kedushin derabanan. What happens next? Umeis, and the brother that did maimer, will call him Shimon. He dies without any children. Is the remaining two brother has to chalitza and not yibum. Why not? Why can't he do yibum? Shenemar, we've seen this in already. The Torah teaches that when one of them dies, that's when there's yibum. And from here we learn out, we only have yibum when there's one zika, there's one connection. Zikas Beis Yevamim, and here there's two connections, because the Maimer Derabanan that was done, the Kedushin Derabanan, did not consummate the marriage, did not make it that there's only a Zika from this second brother, so we still have the Zika remaining from brother number one. Now we have Zika from brother number two, so now you can't do Yibam, you have to Chalitza. Whereas Rav Shimon says, Rav Shimon, you're allowed to do Yibam, and then you'll just do Chalitza to the second one. Says the Gemara. Actually, let's first see a picture in order to make sure we have perfect clarity. In the case over here, stage number one, you see a Reuben, Shimon, and Levi. We have three unrelated women. And what happens? What happens is that Reuven, his nifter, Shimon does maimer. After Shimon does maimer, Shimon is nifter. Now the question is, what does Levi do? So because on Rachel there is two zikas, you have the zika from Reuven and the zika from Shimon. You have two connections. Therefore, Levi has to chalitza and not yibum. That is the Tanakama sheet, as you see on the right, which the Gemara will talk about in 1 second. And as explained so beautifully, davachayim.org, maimer accomplishes a partial kinyan. So we learn out from the pasuk that you need to have only one zika and not two. Whereas according to Rav Shimon, you're allowed to do yibum to whichever one you want, and then you'll just do chalitza to the second one. And explains over here based on Rashi, the reason being because we don't know if maimer is a full kinyan or not, and therefore you can do yibum to whichever one you want, and then you'll do chalitza to the remainder. Says the Gemara, the sheet of the Tanakama was you have to chalitza you have to chalitza, not yibum. Asks the Gemara, V'zikas Beis Yevamim da'araisa chalitza namilot tibai. The Mishnah learned it out from a pasuk. Umeis echad meyam. That only one zika and not two. So says the Gemara, I don't understand. If any time there are two zikas, we have a din da'araisa teaching me you can't do yibum. So why do you have to do chalitza at all? You should need nothing. Explains the Gemara, you're right. Elamid Rabbanan really is a din Rabbanan. And there's a concern. Really, it's all a din derabanan. I guess the pasuk is a semachta of some level. And so why are you not allowed to do yibam? You know why not? The Rabbanan made a gzeira because we're concerned that people might think that when we have two Yevamos that come from one house, people might be nervous. They might end up doing chalitza in that case. Might do yibam in that case. So in this case, truthfully, be'emes, you're allowed to. They din derabanan forbidding you. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. Why? Ask the Gemara. Why can't he do yibum to one and chalitza to the other. Why are we saying, let's go back to the case for a moment, why are we saying over here that when Shimon dies and we have two women that fall Yibam to Levi, Rachel and Leah, why are we saying that you have to chalitza to both of them? Says the Gemara, I don't understand. Do Yibam to one, and then do chalitza to the second one. If the whole concern is a din derabanan, that we're worried that when they come from one house, being bayis echad, someone might by mistake do Yibam. Says the Gemara, so if we did chalitza to one of them, then there should be no concern. So explains the Gemara, no, there's still a problem. Gezerah, you know what the problem is? Shamiyamru bayis echad miksasai banoi. That you might think that in this case that you have bayis echad, that in a case that when there's one person with two yevamos, that miksasai banui partially is banui is built, a lashon referring to that yibum was done. Kivan the umiksasai. Oh, excuse me, we went the wrong. Excuse me, we turned the wrong day. There we go. Umiksasai chalutz. You would have think that a part is done yibum, part is done chalitza. Says the Gemara, and as you see in the top Rashi points out, and they're going to come to say, Yevamos says the Gemara, what's the problem? Why is there an issue if you do Yibam with one of the Yevamos and Chalitza with the other one? It's true, the Chalitza isn't necessary. Again, let's understand what's happening here. If one husband dies with two wives, what do? You do either Yibam to one or Chalitza to one. You don't have to do both. So once you do Yibam to one, the other one leaves scot-free. You don't need Chalitza. But what harm is there if you were to have done Chalitza? We're making a whole Gezerah D'Rabbanan forbidding Yibam. Why? Let them do Chalitza. Explains the Gemara, you're right. If you do Yibam and then you do Chalitza, you're right. Then there would be no concern because the Yibam really says everyone is free. Now the chalitza is just extra, but you know what the concern is? Al gezerah dama chalitz bereisha v'hader miyabim. You might do chalitza and then you might do yibam. And what's the problem with that? V'kam le with an issa daraisa b'asher lo yivneh, that once you don't take the woman in yibam, it's over. You can't do anything else. V'rachman and Amar, it says the Torah based on the pasuk v'asher lo yivneh kivan shloi bana shav lo yivneh. Once you didn't build, once you said and you went and did chalitza to one, it's over. You cannot subsequently do yibam. So the concern is you might do chalitza to one and end up doing yibam afterwards to the other, and that is the reason why in the Mishnah says the Tana Kama you have to do chalitza to both of them. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava, a bit of a similar case, we'll call it a first cousin almost of the din in our Mishnah. Amar Rava says, Rava Nasan Gelim Amarai Hutar Sarasai. Says Rava, what if you gave a get to the one that one did Maimer to, then Hutar Sarasai. So did Maimer Kedusha D'Rabbanan in our case, after Ruvain dies, Shimon does Maimer, and then before Shimon dies, instead of Shimon dying, and now we have this woman with two Zikas falling to Levi. What happened is Shimon did get. He gave a get to the woman he did a maimer to. Then Hodra Tzarasa, the Tzara, Shimon's other wife, is mutter to Levi. Levi could do even to her. Aval, however, he asura. But the woman that got the get, she is asur to Levi. Why? The michlava bebalas I get. Because you might confuse her with a regular Yevama who receives a get. And a regular Yevama that receives a get is usher to the brother. So even though in this case it's not a real case of a get because it wasn't a real kedushin, it was just maimer, it's still going to be forbidden to the brother. The second lashon says the opposite. Rava says even the woman that got maimer and subsequently got a get is mutter. My time, what you gave, you took away, and therefore there will be no problem that Levi will be allowed to do Yibam with her. So again, this last din of Rava was a bit of a sidebar. Rava learning that once we're on a case of the second brother doing Maimer, Rava points out what happens if subsequent to the Maimer he gives a get. Does that fully remove what he did, and thereby now when he is nifter, Levi could go and do Yibam like it's a regular wife? It's a or like a regular case of Yibam, or no, there's still some semblance of the original Maimer. Says the Mishnah, a new case, Shnei Achan Nesuya Shtei Achayos, two brothers married to two sisters, and one of them dies, and then what happens after the first brother dies? His second brother's wife is nifter. Harezu asura lava lamis. You're usher forever. Halvanesser lav shach is a case which we spoke about many times. Let's get the case open in front of us. Here we have it. We have Reuven and Shimon, and of course they're married to sisters Rachel and Leah. Says the Gemara, Reuven dies. At the moment that Reuven dies, what happens? Shimon is usher to Reuven's wife. Why? Why isn't there regular Yibam? The answer is because they're sisters. Achais Ishtai. You never let him marry your wife's sister, and therefore they're usher. If subsequently Leah, Shimon's wife, dies, it still will not allow Shimon to marry Rachel because Kivan She'otra Usher Alav Sha'achas. It's usher forever. Says the Gemara, and of course this is a first cousin to that which we saw 3 days ago in the Gemara in Daf Lamed. Over there were three brothers, and over there it was a case of the mamish, the same case, and we said the same thing over there. So ask the Gemara, the obvious kasha pshita. Our Mishnah is obvious. And this is actually a carbon copy Gemara that we had over there. Over there, it's not fully pushed away because there's a third brother. And we'll explain the picture with the Miksha minute. And yet we said once it's asa for a moment, it's asa forever. It's pashit. Explains the Gemara, Tani really, our Mishnah was learned first. And he thought that the other Mishnah, because it's not fully daicha, because there's a third brother, we thought that there's a heter in that case. But then Visharya, Father Chazil Yisura, and then he decided that no, even when there's a third brother, will be answered by the Chaviv Le'ekadmo, because it was Chaviv, because it's a Chiddush. Whenever you have a Chiddush, it's Chaviv, it's beloved, it's dear to you. So we thought that Mishnah first. Or Mishnah is husband Kama, the Mishnah never leaves from its place. But basically, what the point that we have to know over here is that in this case, when Reuven dies, Rachel is out. It's finished. It's over. Why? Because it's only two brothers, and Shimon is married to Rachel's sister. In the previous case on Daf Lamed, there were three brothers. So even after Reuven died, it's true, Shimon couldn't act on Rachel, but Levi was able to. So there was a Havamina because Rachel wasn't fully nidcha. Maybe she would. It's not called Kivin Sha'asar Lav Sha'achas, and that is the Chiddush of the Gemara. Tanur Rabbanan says the Gemara, in the case that we're talking about over here, what happens if Shimon doesn't have Eira, and Shimon goes and takes Rachel and Yibam? Shimon goes and sleeps with Rachel, so there's a double Isser, says the Tanakama, says Rav Yosi, Rav Yosi, there's an Isser Eishes Ach, it's your brother's wife, which you're not allowed to marry your brother's wife unless there's Yibam. Because there's no Yibam here, the Isser Eishes Ach remains. And similarly, there's Isser Achais Isha, because you're married to this woman's sister. Which if Shimon Chayev Elo Misham Eishes Ach Balvad, you're only Chayev because it's the wife of your brother. So fundamental Machlekes Rav Yosi and Rav Shimon. And as we're going to see, that this is going to be a really fundamental machlekes, whether Isurim add, or rather once there's an Isser, that's the only Isser that remains. But Rav Shimon says one Isser, Rav Yosi says two. As the Gemara on Rav Shimon, there's a brayso that says that Rav Shimon holds you're only chayiv because of Achais Isha. And here it says you're only chayiv because of Eishes Ach. Says the Gemara, it's all a time game. Loi kasha. Let's explain first. It depends depends which Isser was first. If the Isser Eishes Ach was first, if the brother was married first, then that's the Isser Yoiver. If the Isser Achais Isha was first, if you're married first, then that's the Isser. Kansha Nasa Chai Vach Nasa Mis. Again, of course, we've seen this already. Nasa Mis doesn't mean a dead person gets married. It means the brother that will die, he got married. So if you, the living brother, got married first, and then the brother that died got married, then there's going to be the Isser Achais Isha, because first you married the sister. Whereas the other case where the brother got married first, and therefore the Isser Ishes Ach comes first. V'Rav Shimon echad denasa meis v'achanasa chai given the Isser Achais Isha lo chayil tisyabim Yevumi. Ask the Gemara, I don't understand. According to Rav Shimon, in the case where first the brother that died married, and then you married the sister, so what's the halacha? The Rav Shimon says is only an Isser Ishes Ach, because it's your brother's wife. It's your brother's wife, and there's no Isser Achais Isha. So says the Gemara, given the Isser Achais Isha lo chayil, Rav Shimon just was mechadish that the Isser that it's your wife's sister never comes into play, because the Isser Ishazach blocks it, and there's only one Isser, says Rav Shimon. So says the Gemara, when the brother dies, Tisyabim Yebumi, you should be able to do Yibum. Explains the Gemara, Amar Avashi, a beautiful Amdes. Isser Achais Isha Milatali. It's not that it's not there, it's hanging, it's waiting. When, let's go through, and we'll see the picture and we'll explain in a moment. V'kai ipak Isser Ishazach, Isser Achais Isha v'chayil, v'hilkach loy paka. So basically what's happening over here is, this is a beautiful picture. You see there, Rav Yossi says in the top right corner, you're both Isur. Rav Shimon said there's one Isur. Kashan Rav Shimon Stira. Answers the Gemara, it depends on the case. In one case is Nasa Chai. Again, you were the living brother, you were Shimon. And then Reuven got married afterwards. So when Shimon got married, what happened? He married the sister. So there's an Isra Achais Isha. Rachel is his wife's sister. And therefore when Reuven subsequently gets married, the Isser Ishes Ach will not be Chal, because in Isser, Chal ala Isser. But if Reuven gets married first and then Shimon gets married, so when Reuven got married right away, what was Leah to Shimon? What was Rachel to Shimon? It was his brother's wife, Ishes Ach, therefore the Isser Achais Isha will not apply. So says the Gemara, so why don't we say that when the brother dies, actually let's just show it with the case. So in this case, why don't we say that when Reuven dies, all there is an Isser Ishes Ach. So when Reuven dies, the Yibum of Shimon should negate and allow him to do Yibum to Rachel to be no Isser Ishes Ach. Says the Gemara, it's Milah Talui V'Koi, the Isser Achais Isha, the fact that Rachel's Leah's sister is there. It just says nowhere to be Chal, it can't apply because there's another Isser blocking it. But when that other Isser disappears, why does that Isser disappear when Reuven dies? Then the Isser Achais Isha will come into play. That is the opinion of Rav Shimon. Now we go to Rav Yossi. So Rav Shimon held there's one Isser, Ein Isser Chalal Isser. What does Rav Yossi hold? Yesh Isser Chalal Isser. Rav Yossi says in this case, there's two Isser. You have an Isser Ishes Ach and an Isser Achais Isha. It's your brother's wife and it's your wife's sister. Says the Gemara, V'sav Rav Yossi Isser Chalal Isser. Does Rav Yossi really hold that? But Tani learns in a rice, the 7 lines to the bottom of Lamed Beis Amud Aleph. Avar Avira Shish B'Shtei Misais. Nidan b'chamura. So did Avira. That has two ways of killing him. What do we give him? We give him the more chamur, the more stringent one. Rav Yossi Omer Nidan b'zika harishayna says, Rav Yossi, you know what we give him? We give him the first attachment, Abba love that comes to him. But Tanya, we explained in a Raisa, 4 lines to the bottom, Rav Yossi, what does Rav Yossi mean? That the first Aveir that comes, he gets punished with that. If there is one's mother-in-law, and then that mother-in-law but gets married, so she becomes an Isha's Ish, so white of a man. So if one is over the affair with his mother-in-law, he'll get the punishment of chamasai. Whereas Isha's Ish, if Inasis chamasai, if first she was married and then she became your mother-in-law, you married into the family, then Nidam Isha's Ish, then the punishment of Isha's Ish comes into apply. So to ask the Gemara, based on what we're saying over here, is we see Rav Yossi holds that Eid Isser Chalal Isser, and you just told me a moment ago that Rav Yosi holds you're chayiv 2 times, one for Achais Isha, one for Isha's Ach. You're chayiv because Yesh Isser Chalal Isser. Steering Rav Yosi. As we turn over the Gemara, answers the Gemara Amar Avavua Moider Rav Yosi Be'Isser Moisif. Important words. Rav Yosi is Moida when the Isurim are larger. It's a greater Isser. Then Rav Yosi holds that the 2 Isurim do apply on each other. As Tabrashi says, Shuchal al Isser. Ki goin Eishes Ach de Moisevu. What's Eishes Ach? Eishes Ach is your brother's wife. It's an additional Isser. Why? Shebetchila, we're in the Tabrashi. Kishenasa zu as Achaisa v'zu Panuya Nesula misham Achais Isha. Originally, Shimon gets married to Leah. What is Rachel? His wife's sister. Umutaris achol echav, and Rachel can marry any of the other brothers, Levi, Yehuda, etc. She just can't marry Shimon because Shimon is married to his sister. But then this is la'achad me'am, when Rachel marries Ruvain, it's an Isser Moisif. It's a larger, more extensive Isser than Nesra al Kulam. She's also in all the brothers Misham Ishes Ach v'achsham nitoisif Isser alel legabi sharachiv. There's a larger Isser that adds on to her, very important, and therefore, says Rashi in the first Naralan, Amigu the Chayil Shemi Ishes Ach Allah, because now she's called an Ishes Ach. Legabi Sharachav Sheisibutaris Lahem Chalnami Hashem Azel Legabi Didei. Since it's Chal because of the other brothers, it's Chal because of him. Avgav Desir Levikaim, even though to him he was Aser. So generally, it's true. Rav Yisrael's ein Isser Chal Isser, but if the second Isser is a more extensive Isser, it's making more people Aser to her, then he'll agree that Yesh Isser Chal al Isser. Says the Gemara, this is very good, but only if you go drive one way. If the Shimon marries first, and then Reuven marries, so then it makes sense that when Reuven marries this woman, there's an additional Isser of Ishes Ach that adds on to the other brothers. Then Shimon as well gets that Isser. If Reuven marries Rachel first, so now the Isser Ishes Ach is there. Then Shimon marries the sister, so comes along the Isser Achais Isha, my Isser Moisev Ika. What is the additional Isser that is being added on? So why, according to Rav Yosi, you're going to be chayiv 2 times? Maybe you're going to suggest Migu the Isser Bekuluach Vasa. Maybe you're going to suggest that what's the Isser? The Isser is that Shimon comes Aser to all other sisters. Not that it's an additional Isser with regard to Rachel, but that Shimon himself, when he marries Leah, is Aser to any other sister of Leah. Hi Isser Koilalu. Says the Gemara, that's not an Isser Moisif, that's an Isser Koilal. That's a more inclusive. There's 2 different things. There's more extensive Isser Moisif, that Rachel now is also to more people. Then there's an Isser Koilal, where it's more inclusive, in which that Shimon himself is also to more women. And in Isser Koilel, we never found that Rabbi Yosi was minded that we're going to say Yesh Isser Chalal Isser. So says the Gemara, you're right. Elo Amar Rava Mali Love Kilu Asa Shtayim. Says Rava, you know what Rabbi Yosi meant when he said you're chayav for Ishazach and Achais Isha? What he really meant is we consider it. Really, you're right. Rabbi Yosi holds Ein Isser Chalal Isser. Really, there's only one Isser, whichever one came first. However, we consider it as if he was over 2 times. But really he's only chayiv once. Says the Gemara in my nafkamina, shkayach was really only one avera. What exactly does it mean? Though we make it as if you're chayiv twice. Explains the Gemara, lekavru ben Rishayim Gemurim, that we consider him a rasha. We consider him as if he was over 2 averas, so we bury him with likewise Rishayim, and that is the nafkamina to the din of Rav Yosi. Before we get back into Rav Yosi, and the Gemara now is going to go on an extensive hunt in figuring out this sugya of Isser Chalal Isser. Let's just go through these pictures for one moment. Here you see that Rav Yosi holds. This is the Gemara's kasha. Yesh Isser Chalal Isser. That it makes sense that if first Reuven dies and then Reuven dies. First Reuven One more time. First Shimon marries Leah, and then Reuven marries Leah. Then it makes a lot of sense that first it was the Achais Isha, and then after that was the Isha's Ach. However, and as that's actually what it shows in this picture so beautifully, that when Reuven afterwards marries Rachel, what happens? Then Rachel becomes the Isha's Ach and becomes usher to all the other brothers. And therefore there's an Isser Moisif, the Migudi Taisif Isser for the other brothers, it's going to be added on to Shimon as well. But I asked the Gemara, but if Reuven marries Rachel first and then Shimon marries Rachel, what happens over there? That when Reuven marries Rachel, already she is also told other brothers. So when Shimon marries Leah, there's no additional Isser, there's no Isser Moisif. So in this case, Rav Yossi should not agree that there's Yishes or Chalal Isser. Suggests the Gemara, maybe you'll tell me there's something called an Isser Koilel, but in that case, Rav Yossi was not Maida. Maybe you're going to tell me that when Shimon marries Leah, the other sisters become Asr. But again, that's very different. That's an Isser with regard to Shimon. That Shimon himself is Asr to more people, but it's not that the inherent Isser on Rachel is a larger Isser. The Lamdas in Rav Yossi of saying Isser Maisiv is that if the Isser, we're talking about two Isser Meishaz Ach and Achais Isha, if the Isser itself of Isha's Ach, the Isser of Rachel, that Isser itself is larger, that's when it adds on. But here the Isser itself is not larger, and therefore, says the Gemara, really, there is no additional Isser, and rather just like Kavroi Bain, Rishayim Gemurim. So now says the Gemara, we're going to start now, and this is going to take us really all the way into tomorrow's discussion, explains the Gemara, but looked up, really whether we say Isser Chalal, Isser, Ein Isser Chalal, Isser Koil, etc., is a massive machlekes. The Itzmar we learned in a Brisa. Zar Shimish b'Shabbos, we have a non-Goyin. That issue number one is that he's doing the Avodah, and issue number two is that he's doing it on Shabbos. Rav Chia Omer Chayiv Shtayim, Bar Kabar Omer Eino Chayiv Ela Achas. Similar to the Machlekes, Rav Yossi saying Chayiv twice, and Rav Shimon saying Chayiv once. Kofatz Rav Chia v'Nishma. Now let's just hone in on the Lashon. For today, it's not going to mean anything to us, but in tomorrow's daf, we're going to see that this Lashon of each Amayra talking is extremely important. Says the Gemara, Kofatz Rav Chia got up, he jumped v'nishma, and he made a shvua, and he swore, Ha'avoida kach shamati mei Rebbe. This is what I heard from Rebbe, says Rav Chia Shtayim, that you're chayiv two times. And similarly, Kofatz Bar Kabar v'nishma, Ha'avoida kach shamati mei Rebbe, I heard from Rebbe, Achas, you only chayiv one time. And of course, it's a little bit difficult. How could two people make the same shvuah from the same person? The Gemara is going to deal with that tomorrow. Hizchal Rav Chia Laden says, Rav Chia, let's understand what's going on over here. Shabbos, like Kol Nesr. Isser Shabbos is for everyone. Who's allowed to do avodah on Shabbos just like Kayanim Otra? Otra like Kayanim Otra v'loy lezarim, but it's not mutter for a non-Kayin. Yesh kan misham zarais, yesh kan misham Shabbos. So there's two Isurim. Isser number one, you're not a Kayin. Isser number two is that it's Shabbos. That is the reason why over here you have the Isser Kailal it's adding on. Hezchel bar kapar ladin. That was Rav Chia comes on Bar Kapar and he explains Shabbos la kol mesor kishota b'mikdash otra ein kan ela zaros balmum sheshime ein kan ela Zarus. And therefore, when the non-Kohen does the Avodah, he's only going to be Chayiv only one time, Bishvil Zarus, from the fact that he is not a Kohen. And that's the Machlekes Bar Kapara and Rav Chia Bar Kapara saying you're Chayiv once, and Rav Chia saying you're Chayiv twice. Case number two, we're going to have three cases before we call it a day. Case number two, Balmum Sheshimish B'Toma. We have a Balmum Kohen and he's Tamei. Rav Chia Omer Chayiv Shtayim Bar Kapara Meinu Chayiv Alachas. Covers Rav Chia v'Nishma Avodah Kach Shamati Mei Rebbe. Shtayim covers Bar Kapara v'Nishma Avodah Kach Shamati Mei Rebbe Achas. Hezchol Rav Chia Ladon. Now Rav Chia comes along and he explains why you Chayiv twice. Toma la kol Nasr. Everyone's also to be in the Beis Hamikdash B'Toma. Kshahotra B'Mikdash O Eitzel Kohanim Timimim Otra La Kohanim Timimim Otra V'Leila Bali Moment. Yesh kamisham bal momim, yesh kamisham toma. There's two different Isurim, says Rav Chia. Hezchel bar kapar ladin. Toma la kol nasa. Really, toma is also for everyone. Kishotam amikdash otra. Ein kan el misham bal mom. Zarsha ein kan el misham bal mom. So it says bar kapar. There's only one Isser. And case number three, and we'll finish with this. Zarsha eichel melicha. Case number three is we have a non-koyin that eats a bird, eats some chicken that was done with malika, which of course is only which is done with the koyin's thumbnail. There's only a kosher avodah for a carbon, so a balmum of a zar, would not be able to eat it. So Rav Chia Amar Chayiv Shtayim Bar Kvar Mayin Chayiv Alachas covers Rav Chia v'Nishba V'Dikach Shamati Rabbi Shtayim covers Bar Kabar v'Nishba V'Dikach Shamati Rabbi Achas. His Rav Chia Lad and Avela like all Nesra. Nevela is also to everyone. If there's no shchita, it's an Avela. Kshoter b'Mikdash Itzal Kayanim Mutter. Like Kayanim Mutter, it's only to the Kayanim V'Leila Zarim. Yishka Misham Zaris Yisham Misham Malika. So it's two Easter Mis Bar Kabar Lad Nevela Chol Nesra Kshoter b'Mikdash Shoter Inkan El Misham Zaris. It's only going to be one Easter, and those are the three Isurim, the three cases in which Bar Kapar and Rav Chia arguing. Bar Kapar keep saying one Isur, Rav Chia saying two Isurim, and tomorrow we'll pick it up.